Hi, welcome back. It's episode 2 of Fitter and Feisty, Kona Daily News Show, powered by Wahoo. I'm Sarah Gross from Live Feisty Media.
And I'm Bevan McKinnon from Fitter Radio Podcast.
Bevan, you're looking arrow there.
I'm trying to cheat the wind from my Wahoo fan.
Okay, so earlier in the week, I talked to Jocelyn McCauley, and Jocelyn told me that Bevan was being dropped on a lot of their rides during their training camp in Texas. So I decided that Bevan needed some extra training.
And what I chose was my new Wahoo kicker bike, and I'm currently doing 500 watts, and I'm going to do a few single leg drills later on.
Of course you are.
Just to keep the power up.
Amazing. Well, you keep working on that.
Yep.
And coming up on the show, we have 3 world champions who are talking about race strategy. For all you bike geeks, we have some bike techie talk, and that's coming up after this. So Bevan, are you mentally prepared for today's show? Have you been doing some visualization?
I always do visualization. Before any race, before any key talk or any presentation that I have to give, I always visualize how it's going to unfold.
So it's going to go really well today. We're going to have the best show ever.
Nothing can go wrong.
Best of 2.
Yeah, absolutely. Episode 2.
And so coming up, we've got 3 world champions, starting with Daniela Ryf.
And we talked to her about strategy and what she actually does to approach coming into this race, or coming into actually any race that she actually does. And I think there's a big deviation from the way age groupers race to the way that professionals race.
True. And there's no one better prepared than Daniela.
Oh,
so.
No. Look, she's just come off the back of a 70.3 victory, one of many. She's been here on the island before. And look, the race didn't go the way that she hoped it to last year. So, you know, there's plenty of different scenarios that can unfold. And we spoke to her today about what that may look like for her. Do you go into the race with a particular strategy, or are you someone who likes to just let it unfold in front of you?
Well, I mean, of course, I always have a little bit of a strategy, but then if you have a plan A and B, you normally need the plan C because that's what long distance is about. You can't really plan it. I think you got to be able to know yourself and know what what you're comfortable with, trust in yourself. But then there's always something going to happen you don't expect, and there I try to just go on with that situation the best possible, and then make the best out of it. So it's really hard to predict what's going to happen. There's not in the 5 times I raced here, it's always never been like I really expected it.
So having spoken to a number of the key contenders here on the Big Island for the race this weekend, it does seem like it's a real common theme between the top pros about being really instinctive in this race.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talked to Alistair Brownlee earlier, and 2-time Olympic champion, 2-time world champion, and he said something similar.
In terms of having a plan, I think I've kind of never been big on plans in triathlon because you can sit and talk about plans and scenarios and what's your mental approach to this and that all day long, and then you talk about 99 different scenarios and the one that you don't talk about happens. So I think the important thing is you give yourself the physical tools to be able to deal with what you need to on the day, and then you back your decision making when you're in it, and not worry too much about thinking it beforehand. I think you can have an overall strategy which might be race aggressively or patient or push on now or see what someone else does, etc. But I think you just back yourself that you're going to make the right calls when they occur.
So what the viewers may or may not know about Sarah is that she's actually a 2-time Ironman champion. Or are you saying that they should know that?
No, they don't need to know that.
Okay.
But now they do. Thank you. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
How many times did you race Kona?
6 times I raced Kona.
Okay. How many times did you stuff up Kona?
6 times.
Run me through some of the bad decisions that you made.
I would be a really great person to get advice from of what not to do. I've been like waiting for someone to ask me this question. Like when I'm coaching someone who's coming to Kona, I'm like, oh good. Because I got all the information what not to do. So a couple years I came in overdone, right? So it's a world championship and you train a little extra hard because you're trying to race against the best in the world.
Yep.
Try to get that bit extra out of yourself, and then I've come into race day kind of cooked. Either having, thyroid issues or hormone imbalances, those kinds of things. Another one was getting too lean. This is a challenge. I think a lot of women sometimes, and men.
No, look, let's not be sexist here and say it's just a women's issue. I know a lot of men who have as many body composition and body fixation issues as what the female athletes do. This is by no means just gender specific, and it is something that really does affect the race. Yes, that's obviously one of the two big things overdone. Yeah, and even if you're not, you don't have eating issues, you're still trying to come into the race as fit as possible. Like even from a performance point of view, it does make sense to be super lean to race in the heat. And so sometimes people just take that too far and you start to lose strength, right? As soon as you lose muscle mass, you lose strength. So definitely I've done that one. I also, I wore bike shoes that I hadn't tested very much and in the heat, and they totally overheated. I'm not going to tell you what brand it was. They totally overheated and my feet were like on fire. I was going through the aid stations pouring cold water on my feet, and it's just that race actually was okay, right? Can I just stop you there and ask you a serious question? Are you still offering your coaching services? Is that something that the viewers can actually sign up for?
No, I'm focusing on my media career now.
Okay,
yes,
right.
Yes,
fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I mean, I think the best races that I had, even though things always go wrong, and this is probably to the point of that Alistair was making, or that Daniela was making earlier, is that something's always going to go wrong and you have to troubleshoot in real time.
Yeah.
And that perfect race is always elusive. And so my best races were when I troubleshot. Is that a word? Troubleshot? Past tense?
Yeah, pretty much. That'll do.
Yeah. I troubleshot well and then ended up finishing with, maybe slightly off the times that my goal times were, but I still felt good about it at the end of the day.
Well, you came here 6 times. Marinda Carfrey's come here 10 times, and even Marinda Carfrey last year found that the race didn't unfold as what she thought it would. So we spoke to her about her preparation for this year's event.
I caught up to a bunch of, I feel like it was 10 or 12 girls, the main pack. A lot of the key players, other than Daniela and Lucy, were up the road a little further. And I didn't know how to deal with that. Having evenly spaced 12 women riding up to Hawi.
This is not Kona.
This is not Kona. I rode past Sarah True and said, who brought all the ITU girls? This isn't.
Well, she's one of them.
Yeah, that's what I mean. And I'm like, where's the wind? This isn't the Kona that, I know. This is my 10th start this year. It was different, and I did not know. I wasn't mentally prepared for that sort of dynamic. I didn't know how to pass them. Normally, I'm either on the front or I'm second wheel. And in fact, for the second half of the bike, I'm normally by myself, riding, trying to reel in a couple of girls before the run. I was kind of taken back
because it's a new environment, but maybe is that the new norm here in Kona?
I don't know. I think if it's windy, I think we'll have. It depends on the conditions, and I think I could answer that question much better for you after this race if we get some wind. But I think it will tend to go that way more and more because obviously just more and more women of similar ability, swimming the same, and then being on the bike around each other with fresh legs. They're going to be bigger packs. But again, if there's big wind, all of a sudden that 12 metre is no help if there's a crosswind.
Yeah.
I mean, 12 metres you do get a tiny bit of a draft, and also mentally you're just like kind of trying to hang in there. But if you've got a stiff wind coming from your right shoulder or your left shoulder, that changes everything.
Absolutely.
And very quickly the strong cyclists will emerge, and those that maybe aren't as strong will fall back. So I'm going to approach this race with thinking, I mean, I'm going to be further down than normal in this swim, which is not ideal, but it's not unfamiliar territory, and I'll approach it as I've approached it every other year, try and reel in as many girls as possible on the bike, and but in the back of my mind, if I come up on a big group of girls, I'll have a better idea of how to deal with that situation.
So interesting, Bevan, that after 9 times racing here, this is Rennie's 10th year, that she's still learning and having to learn how to re-strategize. And she basically had the 100th scenario, like Alistair said.
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, this race is going to change as more athletes come to it. The level actually changes. We know that the ITU athletes coming in and the shorter course athletes are changing the way the race is actually unfolding. So 10 years ago it's completely different, and she has to adapt to the race changing as much as she's changing as an athlete herself. So it's it's never gonna be the same any year. So you really have to be highly adaptable and highly prepared when you arrive here.
Yeah, and we had an audience question related to this actually for you, Coach Bevan.
Coach Bevan, yeah.
About whether it's different preparing or whether the strategy is different for the age groupers racing or as for pros.
Oh, definitely. I've coached a number of pros at this particular race. Most recently, Braden Curry, who was 5th place male last year. And I'm coaching Jocelyn McCauley in this year's event as well. And the way that I prepare them both physically and mentally for the professional race is distinctly different to what I do in the age group race. The skill set of those professional athletes affords them the ability to be more stochastic or variable in their output, to react to the race differently because moves happen that they need to cover, whereas in the age group race I'm much more controlled and measured in my race management plans. I don't know, you're a coach yourself. Do you agree or disagree with that?
I mostly agree.
Okay.
But I would add, I think it's different if you're strategizing to win the race.
Yeah.
Like if you're racing to win, that's a different thing than if you're just here you qualified and you're just here maybe to do your best race, or if you're finishing mid-pack.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think that could apply to the age group field as well as the pro field.
Yeah.
So if you're someone who's coming here as a pro and you kind of know if you're going to be going after the top 10, you know, you might not necessarily even be racing to win.
Yeah.
And same thing with the age groups. You know, you might be racing to win your age group, in which case you do need to strategize as much as a pro would.
You do, but the problem here in Kona is that 99% of the age groupers go out trying to win the age group, and probably about 98% of those end up walking the marathon.
Yeah.
So I think there's an element of control that needs to be exerted as an age group athlete in order to get the best out of yourself, because your fitness levels are different. But the race changes because of the groups that move around the professional course, and if you're not with certain groups, then you may never see them again. So there is a degree of instinctiveness in the professional race that doesn't actually happen so much in the age group race, and there's more room to play in the professional race and the age group race once we get a whole host of people out there on the Queen K.
Right. And no matter who you are, you know, you only have a certain number of matches to burn. And if you burn them all out during the swim, you're in trouble. So there's only so much racing the race that you can do, right?
Yeah.
And on the flip side, you know, when we talk about controlling, we mean, you know, watching your watts and your heart rate and stuff like that, right? And there are lots of ways that you can choose your equipment appropriately and control your own race.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's paramount that you make sure you arrive here with the best equipment choices that you can afford, unless you're a highly sponsored pro. But those things do matter. It's a very windy race. Aerodynamics matters. Tyre selection matters. I know when I coached Braden here a couple of years ago, he punctured out of the race. That's a significant factor for age groupers and professionals that you need to consider. You know, there's a whole host of things about what you put on your bike, what wheels you choose and so forth. And we spoke with Cody Beals, who's, I would say, an absolute expert in this space. For the people that are racing on the weekend, I know even Jocelyn McCauley, who I coach, who you know relatively well, reached out to you and said, rim width, what should people be running here in Kona? In your opinion?
In terms of depth, you mean?
Yeah. Oh, depth, and then also tyre width.
So I'm choosing to run an 86 millimeter deep rim,
Yep.
which is a choice a lot of people don't make because of the really gusting crosswinds here.
Yep.
So it's not so much the strength of the crosswinds that matter, but more how much they're gusting.
Yep.
And that's what makes Kona sort of unique. It's something I practice with a lot, so I'm comfortable doing that. Some athletes, particularly smaller women, should probably go with a shallower rim than that.
Yep.
In terms of rim width, most of the good rims you're seeing these days that are testing best are around 23 millimeters wide, and tire choice kind of mirrors that. There's a bit of a trade-off between narrower tires being a little bit faster aerodynamically, but not rolling quite as well. So if you really want to split hairs, you can actually talk about a different tire for the front and the rear, which is something I do. So I'm running a 23 millimeter Continental GP 5000, which tests very well aerodynamically. It's got a really nice profile. It tests well across a lot of wheels, especially 23 millimeter wide rims.
Yep.
Rear tire, I'm running a 24 or 25 GP Attack, which actually is a tire that rolls a little bit faster. Because there's a bit of a bias. With more weight on the rear tire, you want a tire that rolls faster. It's shielded by the frame aerodynamically, so aerodynamics are lower priority. The front tire, more about aerodynamics, less about rolling resistance. But that's really splitting hairs.
You put a little bit of thought into this. What about
Just a little.
What about the road surface here and puncture resistance? Is that why you're going for the GPX?
That's right, yes. Yep. So the Continental Series, in my view, and there's no sponsorship here to disclose at all, is the best balance between puncture resistance and performance in terms of rolling resistance and aerodynamics.
Yep.
So there are certainly tires that roll faster, and I've used them.
Yeah.
Vittoria has some. There's some great tubeless offerings now that are a hair faster. But in my opinion, they're just too fragile. And it comes down to a question of personal risk tolerance, you know? For me, I don't think it's going to functionally impact my race to gain a watt or two of rolling resistance advantage, but it's certainly going to impact my race if I increase my chance of getting a flat really significantly.
Okay. PSI. Your PSI. Pounds?
Oh, so this is an interesting question as well. I'm going to be running, assuming there's no precipitation at all and the roads are clear, I'm going to run about 95 rear and 90 front because the road conditions here are good. If the road conditions were poor or there was heavy rain, I'd knock 5 PSI off that. And with some of the new hookless rims, I've just learned you can run significantly lower PSI.
You must need a good week to review bike gear before you make any decisions, but it is a passion of yours.
It's definitely a passion. I try not to get too much in the weeds now, you know.
Oh, you do? Can you get more in the weeds than that?
There are people that do, trust me.
Okay, well that's some good advice. This will go out on tomorrow's show, so there might be some people making some gear selection changes for the weekend. But thank you, Cody Beals.
My pleasure.
So nowadays, Bevan, there's a lot of tools available on the market. We can really sort of drill down and get really specific about our training. We can know what our bike power is at all times. Like we learned yesterday, we can know how fast we're swimming on a little frame on our goggles in the pool now. So it is kind of important to use those things in order to, because you know the best in the world are using them, and so should everybody else if you wanna if you wanna win.
Absolutely, I know Cody Beals is a big indoor trainer in his own right. He's very particular about his gear selection. He's not the only one out there. Every single age group cares about that stuff. And age groupers are becoming more and more data and detail driven in their training, and a lot of training is moving indoors because of the specificity that athletes can achieve from their training with the smart trainers and a lot of the treadmills that are available nowadays. And so we spoke from Matt from Wahoo about some of the evolutions of those products. So did you have one of those fold out indoor trainers?
I did. Yes, I have loads of them just as paperweights now in the garage. And I also used to ride in the lab on one of those old watt bikes. Yeah. Like they were made out of steel and you adjusted the frame and it was all rusty. It was terrible.
Terrible. I used to ride on one of those A-frames as well, but I've moved with the times and now have a Wahoo Kicker smart trainer as well. Matt, your boss at work was around from the A-frames, wasn't he?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think we all were. Everybody that works at Wahoo has an experience with that A-frame torture.
Yeah. And what was the thinking behind Wahoo getting involved in this market in terms of what were we missing out on and where could we go with that indoor trainer?
Well, I mean, you know, the kicker was originally created as sort of a solution. You know, Chip, our founder, you know, he's an engineer at heart, and he wanted something that he could train more efficiently on and have a more enjoyable training experience. And so what was currently on the market, and we're referring to it as that, you know, A-frame, that just wasn't cutting it. So, you know, he created the Smart Trainer.
Now, there's a big movement, and it's been over across a number of years, and I don't know if it's a chicken and the egg scenario with people trying to be safer or people wanting to be more specific with their training, but there's much more training happening indoors these days. You guys came out with the kicker, but it's moved on since then.
Oh, it definitely has moved on. I mean, we, over several like kind of iterations of the kicker, you know, from like better resistance, smoother algorithms to make the resistance changes for workouts or virtual riding smoother, all the way through to the sound. If you listen to a first generation kicker to a generation kicker now, I mean, you could ride that thing in a library and nobody would hear it. And then introducing accessories like the Kicker Climb, because, you know, we said, well, one, we want to make the indoor training experience more immersive, more like your outdoor experience. But we also want to make sure that it's not just about the experience that you're having, but it's also the physical adaptation that you're having to it. So putting yourself in a position that you're going to be in on the bike, whether you're climbing or descending.
When you're climbing, it's slightly different muscle groups.
Yeah,
right?
it's slightly different muscle groups.
Yeah,
and anybody that like actually pays, like, go outside, ride your bike, and see what happens. See your glutes start getting kicked in when you start to climb a little bit more. And then from there, you know, we really feel like the kicker is kind of the gold standard, you know, for smart trainers. And then the Kicker Climb introduced elevation, and then we introduced the Kicker Bike this year in September, and that is the ultimate indoor training experience.
And it's a complete bike, right? So you're not putting your own bike on a thing.
I mean,
like the original kicker.
For sure. And one of the key things that we heard from our core consumers as well as our professional athletes is, you know, taking their bike on and off the kicker every day.
And wrecking tires all winter long.
And all of those little things that just seem like not that big of a deal, but they add up to like time spent not training. You know, so we said, well, we're going to create something that literally is going to replicate your bike fit. And that's really, I would say, one of the big wins for the Kicker Bike is it replicates your bike fit. There's a couple different ways to do it. You can literally enter in your professional bike kit, your bike fit information, and then it spits out, this is where you need to put everything. You can put your aero bars on there, the exact ones you use on your bike. You can set up the shifting to be, you know, Di2, E-tap, whatever you want it to be. You can customize every single bit of it. So there's no excuse anymore to not get the training in.
Okay, Matt, what I really want to know is, can you create a time capsule and put a kicker bike in it and send it back 15 years so I can use it when I was trying to win Ironman?
Ooh. I mean, I think if your goal is for your training to be more proficient and enjoyable, then we could definitely give it a try.
Okay, Matt, well, thank you so much for coming in and updating us on where the Wahoo brand is today.
So that's it for this episode of Fitter and Feisty Kona Daily News Show. Thank you for joining us. We will be right here tomorrow with another great episode.
See you tomorrow.